Alright, first off, is this a good movie? No. But is this a fun movie? Heck yeah, it is. Fast X is the 10th or 11th film in the Fast and Furious franchise, if you count Hobbs and Shaw, and is supposedly the second to last installment. This movie is directed by Louis Leterrier, and it follows Dominic Toretto as he tries to protect his family from the villain of the film, Dante Reyes, played by Jason Momoa. Dante attempts to enact revenge upon Dom after Toretto and his team stole Dante's father's fortune in the events of Fast 5. This movie opens with a re-edited sequence of the Fast 5 film, retconning Momoa's character into that movie. That's my quick summary for Fast X. In preparation for this film, I re-watched the last couple of movies, and I thought that The Fate of the Furious was okay, it was fine, but F9 and Hobbs and Shaw were very poor installments. This is disappointing considering 5, 6, and 7 were all exceptional. And I'm happy to say that Fast X is an improvement over F9, but it doesn't quite clear the bar set by those middle installments. An initial thought I had walking out of this theater was how long this movie was. It clocks in at around 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it has no breathers. It is non-stop action from start to finish, and by the end you kind of get that feeling where you check the time and you go, is this ever going to end? But we'll get to that later. Let's talk about how I saw this movie for a second. I watched this film in a Screen X theater, which was a new experience for me. And if you don't know what that is, there's basically the main screen in front of you. But sometimes, for specific scenes in the film, 2 more projectors will project on either side of the theater walls. This is meant to widen the screen or make you feel more immersed in the film, but I found it very distracting. It's very much a gimmick like 3D, but this is inarguably worse. Maybe if they found a way to remove the lines separating the 3 projections, it might work, but I didn't think it added anything significant to the movie experience. Other than the Screen X theater, let's talk about what else didn't work in this movie. First off is the number of characters. I just want to read you the cast list for this movie, and keep in mind that all these actors basically play main characters in this movie. Vin Diesel, Jordana Brewster, Tyrese Gibson, Michelle Rodriguez, Ludacris, Jason Momoa, John Cena, Jason Statham, Rita Moreno, Helen Mirren, Brie Larson, Charlize Theron, Natalie Emmanuel, Alan Richardson, Scott Eastwood, and Sung Kang. The family has gotten too big. Even just looking at the poster, they can barely fit on it. The movie has a hard time juggling this many characters and subsequent storylines, but there are 2 characters in particular that really didn't work. The first is Brie Larson. Can anyone explain to me why she is in this film? It's not for star power. It's definitely not for acting chops. I guess she is the stand-in for Kurt Russell's character, Mr. Nobody, who is notably absent in this film, but she isn't threatening, and she really doesn't have that much to do in this film. There's a moment where you think she might save Letty, but she doesn't follow up on it. The only major thing she has to do is hold on to the cross necklace for half of the movie. Also, why would Dom even give her the cross necklace? He's given it to his son at one point, but really? Your boss's daughter, who you barely know? Anyways, this brings us to the second character who rubbed me the wrong way, and that was Dante Reyes, Jason Momoa's character, who after 10 years since Dom stole your money, you'd think you'd have a better plan than blowing up the Vatican. He says multiple times in this film that he will break Dom's family, but I guess he didn't think past the Vatican plot. For the entire rest of the movie, he's following Dom around on Dom's terms. He really comes across as non-threatening, Partly because Momoa tried to play this psychotic Joker-esque villain, which does not work at all. At least Joker was a couple steps ahead of Batman. And partly because there is no suspense whatsoever. They partially alluded to this in F9 when Tyrese believes himself to be invincible. But in this film, you really believe it. Dom and his team survive the most insane crap and come out unscathed. Or if it's really bad, Vin Diesel will have a couple of scrapes on his forehead. Never did you think while watching this film that they would kill off a character. Never did you think that the villain would win. And at no point while watching this film did the characters ever feel tied to their decisions, actions, or world. The self-parodiness of the franchise probably accounts for the decline in quality. But enough about what didn't work. Let's talk about what did. The action. This is what you came for. Movies like these are almost exclusively graded on how well they do in this category. I mean, they're called action movies, for crying out loud. If they can't hold your attention for a couple of hours, they're not worth your time. And I'll tell you, I had the biggest dumb smile plastered across my face for most of this film. This movie could be called a comedy on set pieces alone. I couldn't help but laugh at the most improbable and ridiculous scenes, which some might say is a negative thing, but I'm counting it as a plus. You know how the last couple of films have all had their gimmick, like the submarine or going into outer space? Well, this whole movie is this movie's gimmick. Every action sequence is turned up to 11. This movie is very CGI and explosion heavy, but they use those features in such an interesting and creative way that I'm willing to forgive the perhaps middle-of-the-road effects. No pun intended. Another part of the movie I thought was funny, if ultimately meaningless, was the one cameo in the film, who I won't spoil for people who are over-particular about that kind of thing, but I'll just say that I laughed a couple of times when he showed up. The third thing that I enjoyed about this film was the sense of scale. It really was a globe-trotting epic across Europe, and though most of it was probably fake, I think they used those locations very well. Lastly, before I get to my spoiler part of the video and my rating for the film, I wanted to end by talking about the Fast and Furious franchise as a whole. Is it? I can think of two other franchises that are going on right now, Mission Impossible and John Wick. Now obviously the Fast movies aren't as good as either of those, but I think it's great that we have a action movie franchise that's going on right now that can deliver the most over-the-top action with perhaps subpar acting, plot, pacing, humor, and effects, which is a real classic action movie move. Remember when James Bond went to space? Me neither. I had to look it up just to prove my point. I'm not usually an advocate for these types of films, but I've made one exception. I am a staunch defender of the Fast films, because at the end of the day, it's not about the acting, the plot, the pacing, the humor, the effects, or even the action. At the end of the day, what's really at the heart of these movies is family. And if you can't realize that, you don't deserve these films. Alright, up next is the spoiler section of the video, and if you don't want to stay for that, you better skip on over to the rating section, because this is your only warning. Alright, the spoiler section. Nobody dies in this film. Except for one character who they brought back from Fast 5, but he really doesn't serve that much function to the plot. Also, Giselle is back. Thought she was dead? So did I. But it turns out it's a real hassle to explain why people come back from the dead, and the franchise is done doing that. It's just going to bring everybody back and not explain it. The movie ends with a cliffhanger, which will presumably be resolved in the next film. Although there are rumors that it's going to be a 3-part finale instead of a 2-part one. There is an end credits scene which features Dwayne Johnson as Luke Hobbs, which is kind of interesting if you know the behind the scenes drama. And the cameo's name starts with a P and ends with an Eat Davidson. That's basically all the major developments from that film. Now on to my rating. Alright, I'm giving Fast X 2.5 stars because I have to be critical. But anybody who doesn't read into films like I do will enjoy this movie, or at least be mildly entertained for 2.5 hours. Alright, next week I'll be reviewing the Little Mermaid movie, which will most definitely be a train wreck. So expect that in about a week, and you can follow me on Letterboxd to see what I'm watching daily, and you can listen to the podcast version of this video only on Spotify, and yeah, subscribe or something so I can keep affording to pay for these videos.